Chapter 26. The Regular Comparison of Adjectives. Chapter 26 covers the following: the degrees of adjectives, the formation and use of comparative and superlative forms, comparative and superlative constructions using quam, and the ablative of comparison. At the end of the lesson, we'll review the vocabulary which you should memorize in this chapter. There are 4 important rules to remember in this chapter. Rule 1. The affix used in Latin to create comparative adjectives is ior, spelled I-O-R, meaning more, or the ending which is added to many English adjectives to make them comparative. All Latin comparatives employ third declension endings. Rule 2. The affix used in Latin to create superlative adjectives is issim, spelled I-S-S-I-M, meaning most, or the equivalent of adding est to the end of an adjective in English. All Latin superlatives employ first-second declension endings. Rule 3. Latin has 2 ways to say than after a comparative form. A construction we'll call quam plus same case, and the ablative of comparison. Rule 4. In Latin, quam with the superlative means as whatever the adjective is, as possible. Let's start by looking at the terms introduced in this chapter. The concept explored here involves what grammarians refer to as comparison, how to say the equivalent of the English forms big, bigger, biggest. In doing so, the intensity of the adjective increases in stages called by grammarians degrees. These clarify how much an adjective's basic sense affects the thought being expressed by a speaker or writer. English and Latin both have 3 degrees. The first is called positive. For instance, big. It's the basic form of the adjective. This is the degree all adjectives we've studied so far have been. The second degree is called comparative, like bigger. It implies that something is more whatever the quality the adjective represents, which means there have to be 2 things and one of them is bigger than the other. The third degree is called superlative. For example, biggest. Here there must be 3 or more things, and one of them has the most of whatever the adjective's basic quality is. This one's big, that one's bigger, but that one next to the others is biggest. Let's start with superlatives, the highest degree, the counterpart of most, or est in English. Latin forms superlatives by taking an adjective base and adding issim, I-S-S-I-M, plus first-second declension endings. For instance, cert plus issim plus us producing certissimus a meaning most certain, surest, or dulc plus issim plus us producing dulcissimus a meaning most pleasant, sweetest. Did you catch that? Certus, dulcis, one's first-second declension, the other's third, but both use issimus a first-second declension. That's good news, isn't it? No matter what the declension of the positive, a superlative is always first-second. And that's not all. If you order now, we'll send all Latin superlatives in a highly regular form. That's right. In just one small memorizing, you get most everything. Some restrictions apply. See Chapter 27. By comparison, comparatives, not so good. They're more complicated. Really the only thing complicated in this chapter. Do the same things you do to create superlatives, but instead of issim, add ior, I-O-R, representing both masculine and feminine, and you have a comparative adjective. In the neuter, that'll be ius, I-U-S. Unlike superlatives, comparatives are third declension. That includes all of them. So all comparatives are third. All superlatives are first, second, no matter what declension any of their positive forms belong to. Here's a chart with the comparative endings in all cases, numbers, and genders. No real surprises in the formation here. Even the neuter singular eius isn't all that unexpected when you think that us shows up in third declension neuters like tempus and corpus. The only shocker is that there are no I stem forms. As a third declension adjective, a comparative should be I stem, but it's not, for complicated linguistic reasons. If you're interested enough to know, ask me. And here's an adjective, brevis, fully declined as a comparative adjective. Brevior, brevius, brevioris, breviori, breviorem, brevius, breviore. And in the plural, breviores, breviora, breviorum, brevioribus, breviores, breviora, brevioribus. Again, note the absence of I stem forms. And another thing to note is the deceptive similarity between the neuter nominative and accusative singular of the comparative adjective, the ius ending, and the masculine nominative singular of the positive, just us or is. Thus, certius means surer, it's the neuter comparative, whereas certus means sure, the positive form, masculine. Likewise, dulcius means sweeter, where dulcis means sweet, masculine or feminine. Now let's address how to translate adjectives in the comparative and superlative degrees. The basic translations are more, comparative, and most, superlative. But the comparative can also convey a sense of rather, quite, too, that is, more than is necessary. The superlative can mean very, exceedingly, that is, the most ever seen. So, the higher degree forms don't always compare two or more things. Sometimes they just intensify the adjective's basic sense. And finally, let's talk about expectation. When an adjective is comparative and has its basic sense, more, what do you expect to hear after it? That is, this is bigger than. When comparatives carry a sense of more, they expect a way of expressing the thing which is not more. What the bigger thing is bigger than. And Latin has two ways of saying than. One is to use quam. That's right, quam again. But not in the sense of whom or how, this time as a conjunction meaning than. So, what case should the word that follows quam be, the thing being compared? Quam's not a preposition, one of the few things it isn't, so it's not going to take an ablative or accusative automatically. What's the grammatical relationship between the two things being compared? For example, this is bigger than that. Grammatically, comparison operates the same way as apposition, because two nouns are equated, or in this case, not equated, but grammatically, that's the same thing. So how do appositives work? They take the same case as the noun to which they're being equated. That's exactly how the noun after quam works. It's put in the same case as the noun to which it's being linked and compared. We're going to use this convention when a noun operates this way. If I underline such a word and ask you, what case and why? You give the case, whatever it may be, and then say quam plus same case. For instance, Romani fortiores quam hostes sunt, meaning the Romans are braver than the enemy. Hostes is nominative here because it's being compared to Romani, the Romans, which is the nominative subject of the sentence. Let's practice that a little. Take the sentence, fidelior isti quam, some form of ego, eras, meaning you were more loyal to him than some form of I. What case of the first person pronoun ego should be used here? Well, What two things are being compared? Isti and ego. What case is isti here? It means to him, so it's dative. Thus, ego should be dative too, right? What's the dative of ego? Mihi. Let's try another sentence. Nihil pulchrius quam, some form of libertas, scio, meaning I know nothing more beautiful than some form of the word liberty. Can you figure this out on your own? What's being compared? Nihil and libertas. How's nihil functioning in the sentence? It's the direct object of scio. So it's what case? Accusative. What's the accusative of libertas? What declension is libertas? Third. So, libertatem. One more sentence. Vitam iucundiorem in pace quam, some form of bellum semper agemus, meaning we will always live a more pleasant life in peace than in some form of the word war. Do it for yourself. The thing being compared to pace. Its case, ablative. What's the ablative of bellum? Bellow. Not hard, is it? As long as there's a quam serving as the equivalent of than, there's not much to learn here. But that's not the only option. Latin has another way of saying than, the ablative of comparison, in which the equivalent of the word following than in English is put in the ablative case. No quam, no preposition, just the word in the ablative. Of course, there has to be a comparative form to trip off the ablative of comparison, but again, it's very simple. So simple, it can be confusing. After all, the solo ablative has a number of other applications in Latin. Means, time, separation, even manner. For that reason, the Romans used the ablative of comparison less often than quam plus same case. In fact, only when the thing being compared to was in the nominative or accusative case. How confusing it would be if it were ablative, for instance. A Roman could have put in quam plus same case, in this case ablative, or not, using the ablative of comparison, which all by itself implies than. And both would mean than whatever the noun, either way. So, using quam just makes everything simpler, clearer. And the Romans liked simple and clear. It was simple and clear. Let's take the same sentences we used before and say than with the ablative of comparison instead of quam. First sentence, fidelior isti quam mihi eras. Earlier we used mihi because the form of ego was functioning as quam plus same case and was being compared to isti, which is dative. But if we take the quam out, what case should the form of ego be now? It's simple. Just make it ablative. And the ablative form of ego is ego, mei, mihi, me, may. And notice it means exactly the same thing as it does if you use quam. These expressions are interchangeable in meaning. Next sentence. Originally we had nihil pulchrius quam libertatem scio. Take out the quam, and what form of libertas do you want? What's the ablative of libertas? Libertate. Last example. Vitam iucundiorem in pace quam bello semper agemus. You do it. Take out quam, and what case should bellum be? Ablative. And what's the ablative of bellum? Yep, that's right. Back to bello. This is the use of the ablative of comparison the Romans tended to avoid. In other words, it's bad Latin. Let's get out of here in case bad comparison is contagious. Quam can also be used with superlatives, but when it is, it means something totally different. As, whatever the adjective is, as possible, or the most, whatever the adjective is, possible. Yes, another use of quam that makes what, 300? Well, it's really not totally new. This quam is an extension of the adverbial quam how. Literally, how most, whatever the adjective is. That is, in the way that produces the most, whatever the adjective is. That didn't improve your understanding or your mood, did it? Okay, you're on your own. Just learn the idiom. Here's an example. Vir quam fidelissimus, meaning a man as loyal as possible, or the most loyal possible man. And another example. Feminarum quam beatissimarum, of women as happy as possible, or of the happiest possible women. And all of you happiest possible women, come with me. Let's do some vocabulary. Okay, guys, too. The first word is auctor auctoris masculine, meaning increaser, author, or originator. It's a third declension noun. Is it I stem? Not monosyllabic. Not parasyllabic. Must not be. This noun comes from the base aug, that means increase or cause to grow. Thus, originally, an author was the person who made a book grow, and some of them use lots of fertilizer. The next word is another noun, lux lucis, feminine, meaning light. It's third declension. This one's monosyllabic, so is it I stem? Nope. Doesn't have two consonants at the end of its base, only one, C. Next on this vocabulary list is quidam, 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 or quadam, meaning a certain one or thing, someone, something. It's a pronoun, but it often functions adjectively, in which case it means a certain or some. It's a compound of qui, quid, quad, or quid, plus the suffix dam, which is not to be confused with the suffix dem, seen in idem, the same, or the ending of quidem, the adverb that means certainly. What's the genitive singular of quidam? That's really a question about qui, isn't it? What's the genitive of qui? Cuius. So, what would be the genitive singular of quidam? Good. Cuius dam. Translated. Of a certain person or thing. Next word, acerbus meaning harsh, bitter, or grievous. It's a first-second declension adjective. Next word, claris another first-second declension adjective. It means clear, bright, renowned, famous, or illustrious. Here's another adjective, potens potentis, meaning able, powerful, mighty, or strong. What declension is it? Third, of course, but is it I stem? Not monosyllabic, not parasyllabic, but it does look a lot like a participle, doesn't it? NT at the end of the base, third declension endings. It is a participle, the present active participle of possum, being able. So, is it I stem is really a question of whether participles are I stem. Are they? Well, they can be if they function as adjectives, and this one is. So, let's call it I stem, with the understanding that when it doesn't act like a true adjective or go with the noun right next to it, then it will become non-I stem. Assuming it's functioning as a true adjective, and it almost always does, its neuter accusative plural will be potentia. Next word, another adjective. Could it be that this is a chapter about adjectives? Turpis turpe, meaning shameful, base, or disgraceful. Third declension. No issue here. This one is definitely I stem. So then, what will its ablative singular be? Yep, turpi. And its accusative plural neuter? Turpia. I'm going to stop asking that, you know it. The next word is a preposition, pro, meaning in front of, before, on behalf of, for the sake of, in return for, instead of, for, and as. That's like half the dictionary. It takes the ablative case. One way to remember that long list of meanings is to understand that it's cognate with English for. Thus, Latin pro and English for share a number of basic senses, including a locative sense, in front of, before, and two figurative senses, for the sake of and in return for. The next word is quam, the word for than we studied above. It functions as an adverb or conjunction. The than sense exists only in the presence of comparative forms, such as certius quam, a thing more certain than. This is the construction we just studied, quam plus same case. With superlatives, it imports the sense as, whatever the adjective is, as possible. Literally, how most. For instance, quam certissimum, a thing as certain as possible. As we noted above, Latin has a number of quams, including an adverb that means how, and a relative pronoun form which means whom, accusative singular feminine. The next word is a verb that's simple to form but has a tricky meaning. Veto first conjugation, meaning shun or avoid. The verb veto, avoid, looks a lot like the noun vita, life, but these two words are unrelated in their sense or etymology. Do not confuse them. In other words, don't avoid life. And the last word in this vocabulary list is remedium remedii, neuter, meaning cure or remedy. It's a second declension neuter noun. And an excellent reminder about another word, cura curae, which does not mean cure, but care. Remedium's neuter, so what's its accusative plural? Good, remedia. And its genitive singular? Remedii. The first I belongs to the base, the second is the genitive singular ending. That wasn't so bad, was it? Nothing like indirect statement. Do the rules that were cited at the beginning of this chapter now make sense to you? If not, please review this presentation. If so, please proceed to the next slide. For the next class meeting, please bring in a copy of the practice and review sentences for Chapter 26. Nihil pulchrius quam bona discere est.